We took one or two of their opportunities and ran them through the system. What took them about a day now only took them 15 minutes. And what really surprised them was that it wasn't just pulling together all the information in 15 minutes. It actually generated a Word document and an Excel sheet in the exact format that they had been using before. So it was the exact same structure of screening memo, but now it was completely automated, which was quite amazing. Ian, I want to talk about this conversation I had with our customer last week and what we built for them. And then also the kind of productivity that they experienced. So this is one of our design partner customers. They're a AFM-regulated investment platform. And they came to us with this use case where they have to put together these screening memos and investment memos based on materials that they're getting, documents, databases, PowerPoints, like a whole bunch of stuff. They process about 400 opportunities a year, which is a ton, right? And it takes them hours, days to put together the information into a single screening memo. Right? So they came to us with this use case, and
because it's unstructured, right?
Because it's unstructured, right? So,
exactly.
And they want to turn it into something that is templated so they can compare different opportunities. I think that's something that a ton of venture companies have, right? If they're comparing opportunities in finance, you want to make sure it's in a format that is consistent. We took one or two of their opportunities and ran them through the system, and it was quite amazing because what took them about a day to do before now only took them 15 minutes. And what really surprised them was that it wasn't just pulling together all the information in 15 minutes. It actually generated a Word document and an Excel sheet in the exact format that they had been using before. So it was the exact same structure of screening memo, but now it was completely automated, which was quite amazing.
So you can probably stick something in a template, but I think they're very positively surprised when the content is actually very usable, because often you also hear people say like, oh, I got such a silly response from AI. So if we're able to give them not only the template, but the content is also very useful, I think they were quite impressed. And that's what I heard that the response was.
Yeah, it was finished work.
Exactly.
Which is a little bit different from all the random experiments that we're all doing. We're dumping things into Claude or in ChatGPT, and then we're quite excited about what comes out. But to make it actually useful in a work setting, it has to be a finished product. And that happened here.
It motivates you also, right? Because if you then feel like, especially if you're saying the volume is around 400 a year, and it requires like a mountain of work every time, because you get these things completely unstructured, but your investment committee is probably expecting a structured format so they can compare it. But if you have indeed an AI, or in this case, a process around AI that helps you, it really gets you going, because otherwise you're sort of staring at a mountain of work, I can imagine.
Yeah, I have that all the time. What AI does for me is it helps me get over that initial hurdle.
Yeah,
right? Just get started, to get going. And, throughout the day, I have multiple AIs for me, kicking off new projects, new ideas. So I just, I get things going so much more quickly. But then to get it to an actual outcome, that's the tricky part.
It's a tricky part. And if you do something one time with AI, you don't often put in the effort of putting all the things in place, the conditions in place that get the correct outcome. So if you do something one time, you just sort of wing it, you start talking to it, you maybe attach a document. But if you have this sort of, especially if it happens 400 times a year, you can actually invest quite some time to get it right. Like, what is the process, which model I'm going to use, which context I'm going to use, which rules I'm going to apply. And it built that whole skill so it also follows the template that is expected. So it requires some work in the beginning, but if it happens often, it really pays off to do that. And that's, of course, the type of work we did for this specific client.
Yeah.
It's very different from a one-off thing, I guess.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's also, it's crucial with AI systems that you provide the feedback, and that you, like you're saying, you can't just throw stuff into a chat box or a co-pilot or whatever it is and expect it to come out with something great all at once. In this particular case, if you're comparing 400 different opportunities and you want rigid structure to it, then you have to train the AI to be really smart about it and to be very structured about it. And you have to be able to also validate that the numbers that it distills from all those documents are actually correct and sound. So there's also this notion that it has to be right. And, if there's a mistake in the numbers, that could be quite disastrous.
And
So
an
I think,
AI is not good at calculating numbers, right? So, because it's sort
well,
of,
it depends. It depends, right? I mean, if you drop it into ChatGPT, it might not be good at calculating. But if you drop it into an AI that knows that it's expected to do calculations, then
exactly,
it can be amazing, right? Because
yeah,
these things can actually write code
to do the calculation.
and do very structured algorithmic work, but it has to be instructed that way.
But of course, you and I think many people that are watching this probably also, but there's a group that doesn't understand it. There's a difference between an LLM that answers a numeric value by predicting that that's probably what you expected, or an AI that understands, okay, I'm not great at predicting this numeric value, so let me write a little bit of Python code to actually do the calculation. And that happens, of course, underwater. You don't see it. In the end, you just get a formatted thing. And that's really also the solution you're talking about with investment memorandums. We, in the end, solved it by creating a skill. And a skill is basically some instruction and some code wrapped together in this format called a skill. And you can create outputs like that. What, of course, is nice about that skill is that it is highly adjustable. So if you have another investment memorandum, but it's slightly different, you can reuse probably most of that skill and maybe just change some of the templating or whatever you want to change. So a lot of your thought and energy and passion that you put into this project is not gone. You can use it again. I think that's what clients also really like, because they often have repeatable work that comes back in different shapes and form. Another example of that is the example we talked about recently. I was in that meeting with one of our colleagues, and our own accountant came with an email during that meeting, and I thought it was a fun thing to bring it up during the meeting because we were talking about a similar project, and then our own accountant had a problem. So they were doing our tax returns and they were looking for a missing invoice. So they saw the transaction in our bank, but it didn't have the invoice. And what happens then? Somebody at this accountant has, with their finger, looked, these are the transactions, these are the invoice, I'm missing it. I'm going to create an email. Hi, Ian. I saw you had a transaction of this company. I'm missing the invoice. It's a lot of work. Of course, for that one time, if that person would have thought, let's use AI for it, would probably not have made a lot of sense, because she would have had to manually attach maybe an invoice, instruct the AI to write a nice email. In that time, she already could have made that email to us. But if you know that this is a repeatable problem that happens probably every day with clients of theirs, we can create a skill that looks at bank transactions on the left side, looked at incoming invoices on the right side, and say, when this situation occurs, create this template of an email and send it to the person. What is similar about it, that there's an expected outcome and you solve real world work. What is different between the two is that the use case you talked about required a lot of thinking capacity to create an investment memorandum. This one, there's not a lot of thinking capacity to create an email, but it just happens so often that you still want to put a skill in place to avoid the sort of everyday, very routine-based, repetitive work, right?
Absolutely. So both of these things are repetitive. Just one takes a lot of data in and then applies some vigorous understanding of the documents to create like a summary screening memo. And in your case, it's a much smaller set of data that gets collected, but it just happens much more often, right? And it's such a simple case for an AI model to act upon.
Yeah, very doable.
Very, very doable. And I know you and I mean, we've both done some angel investing. We've seen a lot of these investment, the PowerPoints, the pitch decks, and I recognize the desire to restructure them in a way such that you can compare things.
Some of these funds know it's possible, but they're a bit reluctant to just drop it in AI because they probably promised the sender of the deck not to share a sensitive data, right? So there is probably, I think people do know AI could probably help them, but I don't think everybody is as comfortable with just share everything with AI. So there's also that aspect there, right? The sort of trust where your data is going.
That ties into a conversation we had last week together with Bart. We were talking about how Aimable is a different kind of company, a different kind of software company, right? We believe that we're not just a consultancy that does one-off implementations for customers, but we actually feel that there's a need for a safe AI foundation with building blocks that gets you going and that kind of protects that whatever comes out of the AI is sound and grounded in actual documents and actual company knowledge and not just hallucinated, right? But it's also taking customer data into account, making sure that privacy is being managed and no sensitive data is being shared with an external model. And that when that's desired, that the AI capability and the data is actually stored in Europe or in the Netherlands even, right? So
or where you want. Yeah, exactly.
Or wherever you want, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes you just need those big foundational models, right? The ones that are really, really smart. And then, we have to use the American models because maybe they're the fastest and the highest quality, but then you want to at least make sure that the sensitive data is not exposed. And often, that's completely unnecessary to share names of people. It doesn't have to do that to generate an investment memo.
No, but what it does have to do, because if you would just say, like, let's take a black marker, right? And I'll mark out everything that's sensitive, then the AI cannot make a lot of sense of it. Because if you're like person 23 and I consistently call you person 23, I know that that's person 23. And if person 23 is giving some sort of token to person 25, we can still understand it. But if everything would just be black, like a black line with my marker, we wouldn't understand it. So there has to be some sort of logic to how you redact the information. So AI also understands it. If we just take all the sensitive data out, it doesn't understand it at all. So it is more complex than you think. And that's why also maybe circling back to the type of company we are, you could indeed say like, okay, let's build something bespoke, more like what a consultancy would do for this client. Or you could say on the other hand, okay, you're a true software company, you deliver a platform, good luck with it. Both, you're missing something. And that's why if you look at what we actually deliver, I think it is experienced more almost like the consultancy, because we deliver that working investment memorandum generator.
It's highly tailored towards the customer's environment and workflows. Yeah,
exactly. But we are actually just delivering the Aimable platform with a skill on top, because we feel that every engagement, you like, for instance, this investment memorandum generator, but also, for instance, how you do that redaction. We spoke about redaction. There will be a certain time, some sort of sensitive field that we have not been trained on enough, it will pop up, and because of the human in the loop, you can still mark it as, hey, you have to take that out. At a certain point, the platform is going to understand it. So you want to actually have a compounding platform. You don't want to every time start from scratch. So the whole idea that we wrap something that's maybe perceived as a service, because we come and create the investment memorandum, it's perceived as a service, but it is actually still a software company. I think this sort of hybrid type of way we do it has been really useful for these first engagements in our young life of the company, right?
Totally. And also, it's important that to recognize that the platform underneath, the Aimable platform, is not just there for the UI, right? The what we see with this particular customer is that they have their investment committee and the people internally, they're working with the user interface, and they're asking the user interface to run an analysis and to generate a screening memo, an investment memo, even a contract eventually, all based on the same data, which is also interesting, by the way. But we're also envisioning that one day agents might be joining them. And what I thought was interesting was that this particular customer shared a vision where they said that one day they hope to have an online portal, like a website, right, where external people can just come to them, drop in their documents, say, here's my, the details about my investment thesis, and it will automatically get picked up by the agents and processed for the employees of the company. But then those agents have to adhere to the exact same rules as the humans within the company. And I think that's something that we feel very strongly about, right?
Yeah, because I think if you design a product, maybe if you design a product, software product 10 years ago, you had something maybe with an Active Directory, you made really something for humans to have an account, etc. And then all of a sudden people are using agents, then you have to sort of as an afterthought, try to figure out how do I get the agent that doesn't have a user account sitting in the same rule. So we created something what we call then a principal, and a principal can be an agent that has certain rights into a space. You're allowed to use this model. You have to use maybe this type of redaction ruling, other policies that apply, which audit trail, which knowledge bases do you have access to. So that's defined in the space, but we don't discriminate. That space has those rules for a person or for an agent. Now they're saying, okay, maybe one day we'll have a portal where those people that they work with, they can be all over the globe, right? So I think for them it's also interesting that an agent that works 24/7 picks it up. But what if that person on the other side of the planet is not a person?
Yeah.
Then you don't want
it.
It's an agent.
Right.
What if that microfinancing institute in Africa says, hey, we found a great way to get our processes better. It's actually an agent, and an agent is going to reach out to different investment portals. But it's not a portal, it will be a direct API, MCP, whatever we want to do. And they're talking to each other. I think that's in a sort of ultimate end state, right?
That might be where we're heading. Thank you, Ian. Talk to
Thank
you later,
you.
man.